Hi there.
Hello. I think I've got audio working. I'm figuring out video.
Oh, great.
Although it's probably in your best interest that I not figure out video, but I'm trying.
So, Anya, this is Molly. Shall we wait just one more minute for everyone to come on?
I think so. Andy will be delayed a little bit, but he will be joining us. And Christina might, if she's feeling low enough. And I don't believe I've heard from anyone else. Tanisha or Lindsay, have you?
No, I have not heard from anyone.
And then there's a message from Parasa.
So,
Christina is here.
oh yay, Christina, thank you for tuning in. Are we, Anya, well, you know if we're, oh, Parasa, hi, good. Lunch is always
Yeah, and so sorry, I was having audio issues. I couldn't hear anyone on my end, so I think I resolved it.
No worries. Molly, I think we're good. So,
Do we have a quorum? I know that we don't really have, but do we have the majority of our members here?
I think so. And Tabitha is signing on right now.
Okay.
Well, maybe just to give another minute to folks. It does take a bit of time to sign on.
To sign on. Okay. Okay, perfect. Tabitha, we'll just let you kind of multitask for a few minutes. That's totally okay. I am going to go ahead and start, Anya, just to start with the welcome. Welcome to the members of the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee of the Youth Development Council. For the members that are new, welcome to our subcommittee. And we have a packed agenda as always. For today, and very great guidance from staff to lead us through our agenda. I would like to take the opportunity to just acknowledge and take a moment to appreciate the land for which I sit on, and that since we are a statewide committee, just a land acknowledgement that has been provided to us by Andy Leonard through the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. So honoring his words as I share them with you this morning, or this afternoon, I apologize. I'd like to acknowledge the many tribes and bands who call Oregon their ancestral territory and honor the ongoing relationship between the land, the plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call home. We recognize the continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and the subsequent bands within those tribes, and thank them for continuing to teach us how we might all be here together. And I just want to take an opportunity to thank and acknowledge the tribes on which the ground I work on, which is in Wasco County. And it includes the tribes from both Washington and from Oregon and Washington, the river tribes, which are the bands of the Wasco, the Warm Springs, Yakima, Nez Perce, and the North Clackamas and the Northern Paiutes, and how they have taught us here locally how to celebrate and be one with the river and the salmon from which swim in the river. So just that moment. I encourage each of you to learn and take the moment and time to find out more about the tribes and the indigenous people who live and have worked and tended to the land in your area. From that, I'm going to hand it off to Anya. And let's spend some time talking about our R/ED technical assistance for the counties.
Thank you, Molly. Good afternoon, everyone. I almost said good morning, just following your lead. Sanjay, are you on line? It's just hard to see. Yes, and we have a thing. So I will, without any further ado, I will just pass it on to Sanjay, who is our racial and ethnic disparities coordinator, who has been working.
Anya, this is Molly. Can you give me kind of an idea of the time for which I'm going to need to hold this to?
So we have about an hour for this discussion. So Sanjay will share a couple of slides that she had put together just to frame the conversation and the direction where we're going with was the technical assistance. It's still in the draft form. And then we would appreciate feedback both from the committee and if we have members of the audience who have comments as well. And of course, right at this moment, I got an email from Jeff Milligan that he cannot connect to the meeting. So I will mute myself for a moment and I will give directions to Jeff. And meanwhile, so I know Sanjay is on the line and I believe we have the PowerPoint.
Ready to go whenever you all are.
Excellent.
By the end of the meeting.
Oh, you're there too. Okay.
Okay.
That's
So,
your Jeff Milligan's voice. Yes.
So Sanjay, I'm going to turn it over to you to do that. And then I'm going to ask for any of our committee members, if you have questions, to do one of two things. Raise your hand or I will monitor chat. And so we can have that dialogue. And I really encourage questions from the committee members.
Molly, if I may, I also like to acknowledge that we have Mark Greenwald with us.
Okay.
From Oregon Youth Authority representing JJS. And also, I don't know, Mark, is Doug going to be joining us? Do you know?
I believe he was going to try. He may be tied up for something, but you've got me for the duration.
Oh, wonderful. So good to have you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
Mark. And the other part is this is a public part of a public meeting. And so at the end, I'm going to ask, we have lots of participants today and guests, and I really want to acknowledge and hear from them as well at the end. So we'll go from there.
Thank you, Molly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Sanjay Moore. I'm the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator with the Youth Development Division. And I will be doing a recap because we've discussed this in a couple of previous meetings of the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Technical Assistance that will be for focused county juvenile department participation. And as Anya stated, I'm very fortunate and blessed to have one of our partners here today with me who I'll allow them the opportunity to share at the designated time from JJS. Again, Mark Greenwald and Doug Thomas may be joining later. And if the universe aligns properly, he'll be here right when it's time for JJS to give an overview of their role in this process. And if not, Mark definitely can handle it alone. And also, Molly, just for everyone's information, I have a few slides. Much has been seen by many of you before, so I will go through them pretty quickly. And then anytime during the slide, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to raise it at that time. But hopefully this will be a catalyst for a conversation and discussion when the slides are complete. But at any given time, if you have a question or interjection for me, please don't hesitate to do it or put it in the chat. I believe Tanasia has my slides ready so that we can move forward with the presentation and discussion. again, this is just a review, and I'm fortunate to see so many of our partners and collaborators here, as well as the Juvenile Justice Committee. I would like to thank Brian and Anya for their support and insight and perspective and redirection during this process, as well as the Juvenile Justice Committee members for all that they have offered up until this point. And I look forward to your continued participation in this process. And to our county participants, this is an ongoing journey, and hopefully this is the beginning of a relationship that will allow us to grow and strengthen our work in racial and ethnic disparities. Next slide, please. So just to recap, the Juvenile Justice Committee and the Youth Development Council have already approved this framework. So we're kind of just reviewing it and having the opportunity to fine-tune details and again, engage in feedback from any participating county juvenile departments who are present. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So for those who aren't familiar with how we got here, I'll just give a brief background. It's not last year. This year, at the end of the previous biennium, in submission of the juvenile justice crime prevention plans, there were 17 counties who received a needs improvement on one of the questions, which addressed cultural appropriate practices and racial and ethnic disparities work. And those counties received conditional approval of their plan. And the condition was that by June 30th of 2022, they must accept technical assistance from the YDD. 6 counties received unsatisfactory for question 6 on the juvenile crime prevention plan submission, and those counties received provisional approval of their plan. That provision was that they must accept technical assistance from the Youth Development Division by December 31st, 2021. This is not a punitive process. We want to reiterate that over and over again. I like to look at it as an opportunity of growth and the opportunity to create a culture of equity within the county juvenile departments for all the youth that we serve, and of course, our most vulnerable, who many times, as our data has shown us, are our Black and Brown youth. And also want to reiterate that this process does not have to be complete by these dates. They have to start by these dates. So this is not the time deadline to have everything done. Just want to make sure that that's clear. Next slide, please. Other way. And this is an overview of the process, but I know you're like, what? I can't read that. So I came prepared with the bigger version. And Tanasia's done a switch over to that version so that hopefully you will be able to see everything on here better. And while she's doing that, just want to know if there are any questions or comments so far.
So Sanji, this is Sam. Just wondering, I guess you opened up with saying they have to accept the technical assistance. What are the repercussions if a county declines?
That is something I believe has to be formalized, but it was my understanding in the Juvenile Justice Committee that this was approved, is that the provision and the condition acceptance could possibly determine the receipt of the award. So that is something that the Juvenile Justice Committee will have to refresh yourselves on to determine if that is indeed how the process will go. Because I believe when Judge Abernathy made the recommendation, it was that contingent upon accepting technical assistance, the provision or the condition was that if you do, you can still receive your award. And if not, I don't want to put in my assumption. So that is something that the committee would need to revisit.
Thank you, Sanji.
Anyone, before we, I think that's a very important question, Sam. Thank you for that. Would you all like to table that until later in the discussion, or is that something you would like to address now?
Sonji, this is Molly. That's a contractual thing, so I would like you to continue with your presentation. And I think that's somewhat outside of the scope of the committee at this moment in time. I think that was contractual.
So the participants in this process are myself, the YDD Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator, the focus county juvenile departments, again, 6 who received provisional and 13 who received conditional. The Youth Development Council and the Juvenile Justice Committee are partners with JJIS, the Juvenile Justice Information System, and a to be identified diversity, equity, and inclusion co-facilitator that will help us host a later DEI related training. The purpose of this technical assistance is to provide a robust and comprehensive training and technical assistance to participate in county juvenile departments and to end racial and ethnic disparities at all contact points in the Oregon juvenile justice system. See, I just want to give a shout out to the universe. I think Doug Thomas just joined us, so I'm very happy about that. So now our full family is here. The goals of our technical assistance is to provide education, tools, and resources that will reduce overrepresentation of youth of color in the Oregon juvenile justice system, reduce disparate treatment of youth of color, reduce unnecessary entry and deeper movement into the juvenile justice system, enhance cultural competency and awareness, and increase engagement with youth and families of color. Just to give an overview of the process framework that we have discussed a couple of times, the key activities will be participation in a to be determined either virtual or in-person meet and greet. And for those who, Molly, I see your hand, I'm just gonna finish this sentence. And I will address any feedback or question that you have. For those counties who are present, this is something that hopefully we can briefly touch on, get your insight about. In our conversations, it's been discussed that optimally and ideally, the meet and greet can happen in person, but we know that because of public health, safety precautions, that may or may not be possible because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we would like any preliminary feedback about if an in-person meet and greet is possible. And that is just a one-on-one meeting between myself and any designated staff within the county juvenile department to foster a sense of relationship and to begin the TA journey. Molly, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a question, and I think I'll hold it now that I think about it, I'll hold it because you're presenting this as a full document, and then I'll bring back my question. So keep going, Sonji.
Thank you. Next, there's going to be the development of an individualized training with myself. And we know that each county juvenile department is unique and has its own unique dynamic, needs, makeup, staffing level, demographic based on your location. And so this is not a one size fits all process. During this individualized training and TA, I will work with the designated county staff to create a SWOT analysis, and SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and also identify SMART goals, which goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And that will be the core of the TA based on information that I provide and based on the unique needs of the particular county juvenile department, in which this is going to be a series potentially of set scheduled meetings in which we do this process that will lead to the long-term goal, which is resubmitting the juvenile crime prevention plan. We will also be hosting a data training and a data walk, and these are separate events that will be co-hosted in partnership with JGIS, and this will help the county juvenile department strengthen data identification and analysis skills. And so when I get to the timeline, I will open the floor for our JGIS partners who are here to give more insight about what we have discussed and envision that process to be. I will just say that the data walk is still something that is under development, because ideally that is something that will be held in person if safety permits and if the pandemic has reached a place where we can hold an in-person event, because I believe that that's the best opportunity to really drive home the purpose of the data walk and the experience that is possible from it. But before then, we will have a data training that will provide information that you all can very much find and hopefully will find useful. Another key activity is to attend one additional DEI related training per year. And it is our hope next year, we have been in communication and preliminary conversations and have potentially identified a partner to co-host this training with the Youth Development Division. And we would hope that you all will attend so that you can get another perspective and another expert's tools, resources, and information about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really connect that with the racial and ethnic disparities work that we do. And finally, I think it's a good opportunity to allow some of the more rural and more counties that have less diversity to visit counties that have more diversity and a broader cultural landscape. And the purpose of that is hopefully to engage and observe a more diverse county juvenile department and have the opportunity to enhance cultural awareness from the experience. And this is something that the Juvenile Justice Committee and myself will be facilitating the process for. And finally, at the time deemed appropriate, the county juvenile departments will resubmit their JCP plan. Additional activities that we hope the county juvenile departments participating will consider are forming a mentorship relationship with a county juvenile department who has more experience and progress in addressing racial and ethnic disparities. Also, to host a community forum and hear from and amplify the voices of communities of color, both youth and families. And that is something, again, that the YDD will help facilitate and assist in the planning of. Hope that the county juvenile departments can find a way to increase youth representation on governing and decision-making bodies. And finally, consider and or revisiting participating in the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. So this is just the framework that we have discussed previously and a draft of what we envision the process to be. There's still the opportunity to do some minor tweaks. And again, we hope to hear feedback from those participating and the Juvenile Justice Committee once again on any thoughts about what has been shared again. Tanasia, you will please go back to the main presentation.
And I would recommend that you leave that slide up and you give folks a little chance to like ask questions and go. I know we have the timeline to come, Sanji, but I know we've got about 35 minutes or so left, and that slide is like has everything. That's a suggestion. If folks want to get into timeline, we can, but Sanji feels like you've given a like fabulous like overview. And I just wonder if nothing else, if there are questions to this point, it would be good to get into them. So I don't know, Sanji, Molly, Anya, what do y'all?
Yeah, no, I think, so I'm gonna actually ask Tanasia. I'm not sure that I have pulled up, and it's just, I apologize for not pulling it up, all of our committee member names on who's on our committee. Will you just run through them really quickly, who's been on the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee, so that I am absolutely 100% I'm inclusive?
Okay, I have Pamela. I don't know how to say this name. Azatu, Parissa, Sam, Andy, Tabiti, Adrian, Abraham, Christina, Sanji, Molly, and Anya.
Okay, I thought there had been some changes from our last YDC meeting, but that
There are changes, but that's not happening quite yet.
Oh, okay. See, I was jumping the gun. Sorry, I was being.
No. Molly, some change has happened. So Pamela Abernethy is no longer on YDC. Her term completed. So was Isa too.
Okay.
Now Adrian Livingston is a newer member of the committee. There she is.
Yes.
Adrian, say hi.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. So good to have you here. So the change, yeah, so this is the change that has been implemented. Adrian here and Pamela and Isa too are no longer on the committee.
And did I hear? Okay, perfect. That helps me make sure that I knew Adrian. I'm not sure I know all of the names that are on the list, which is totally okay. But I didn't want to miss anybody. So thank you. Okay. Out of the committee members, I have a couple of questions, but I'm just going to leave mine till the end. Sam, Adrian, Christina, any questions? Tabiti, if your sound has been resolved, I'd love to hear yours as well. And Parasa, yours as well.
I don't have any questions, but I really do like the idea of, counties that are not as diverse, visiting counties that are, different places that are, I think for them to see an example. I just really like that that addition. And I'm new to this, so I don't know what was necessarily done in the past. So just from what was presented today, that was really one of the definitely things that stood out to me.
Yeah, I'm actually going to have a response to that in a minute that might be a little bit different, Adrian. So I appreciate that getting called out. Anybody else?
I'm fine. And I do have sound now. I had to switch headsets. So
Great.
Hey, Molly,
Yes.
I'd just like to suggest that this idea of visiting other county juvenile departments, which I think is a good idea, but I'd like to add to it, my suggestion is that we don't just frame this as being all about the juvenile departments in terms of what goes on in juvenile justice in a county. We, for example, in Clackamas County, we depend on many other partners, stakeholders, community members to help us do what we do. And I know that that's very important, especially in smaller counties. So my suggestion would be to encourage a team of folks that are involved in helping young people to get the services that they need so that they can successfully transition away from the juvenile justice system, to not just be exclusive to juvenile departments. I think that's in my mind, that's really important.
Right. Thank you, Christina.
And just to, sorry, I guess I'll allow any other questions or comments before I respond.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. So Parasa, can you have your hand up? Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, want to thank Sanji for the presentation. I think the overview here is really helpful to just get a sense of what some of the major steps and scopes of work will be underway for folks who need some additional technical assistance. A wondering I have is when we're looking at grantees' strengths, are we also able to take into account their kind of current capacity and assets as well as part of that? Because I was just thinking about the size of the different departments and how they're organized may look really different from county to county. So just wondering how we're factoring that in. And I really like what Christina had raised around the partnership piece too. If there's an opportunity whenever it's appropriate to involve partners with some of the planning and technical assistance work, I really like that idea.
Great. So I have a couple pieces. Parasa, I thank you so much. I think that we have to be really careful that we're not sitting in chairs in Salem. And I just have to defend my small counties in a way that so that I can articulate that this committee didn't just tell an entire half of the state that you're too small and unworthy of knowing how to work in your own department. Therefore, you have to go to a large county to see how it's done. I don't want any of my colleagues hearing that out of my voice that just occurred. It is around just engaging in conversations and opportunities to work together and learn. But there is no sense in this conversation. Do I want counties that do not have large staff to feel like we just told them that they don't do a good job, they need to go learn from a large county? I have to state that. There's amazing work that can be done in very small counties and is being done in very small counties. So please, please, all of the audience that's out there, I do not believe that was our intent. And if it was our intent, Brian and I will have a conversation that we can kind of talk about that messaging, but I hope that was not our intent that we just did to all of the small counties. And the second thing I have is around goals. And this is a question back to probably DOJ and the contracting. We contract for our JCP plans for a very specific ORS. I think it's ORS 417-870. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think that's it. I want to make sure that these 5 goals stay in line with that ORS and that they are not overreaching beyond what those contracts say. I want to do this in partnership and collaboration. So my question is back to DOJ. Do JCPs, do our grantee relationships with counties have the authority to talk about overrepresentation of youth of color in the juvenile justice system? And I want to just make sure that piece is there, because it's the high-risk juvenile crime prevention dollars. And again, what we write for, I want to make sure DOJ is in line with us on. So that's a question to you, Brian, or to Anya, to ask to DOJ.
Thank you all for your questions and comments. I wanted to say a couple of things, and I'll go in order of the comment. Adrian, thank you for your feedback on that. Really appreciate it. And I believe that that was, again, another council member previously strongly supported, including that component of visiting a more diverse county juvenile department. To both Molly and Parasa about the recommendation to, and excuse me, Christina and Parasa, pardon me, the recommendation to collaborate. I think the opportunity, because this is technical assistance for racial and ethnic disparities from the YDD in direct correlation to an identified need from county juvenile plan submissions. And so I think there's an opportunity here for this to begin the journey of identifying, because this work as a whole is about identifying vested stakeholders, and can't be done without partners in the community, without other juvenile justice stakeholders, entities, agencies, municipalities. So I think that's a key component that's incorporated in here, but involving them in this particular technical assistance plan is something that would begin to far overreach potentially our capabilities. I think in the possible mentorship opportunity, or within the SWOT analysis opportunity, where you can identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Opportunities, what community partners can we collaborate or partner with in order to get this work done? What are some recommendations from our brother and sister counties who have a little bit more strength in this work of potential community partners? So I think that that is a part of the process. Again, this is the overview and framework. And finally, in reference, not finally, next to finally, in reference to the size, I hope it has never come across, because I don't recall saying that at all myself, that the size of a county is dictating what work can be done or has been done. We have identified particularly that the participating counties needed improvement or showed opportunity for growth as it relates to cultural competency and awareness practices and identifying racial and ethnic disparities. And so that has nothing to do with size. It has to do with where the county is at when we cross paths with them on this journey. And I think the opportunity exists for you to identify, again, in that SWOT analysis, your capabilities and what's possible with your current dynamic and demographic as far as staff. Because the reality is that what could be done in County Yellow may not be able in County Red. And so those are some of the things that are ongoingly evaluated throughout this process. And I believe the purpose of visiting a more diverse county, one thing that I saw frequently in the submissions was that we are a homogeneous county that is mostly white. So it's hard for us to address racial and ethnic disparities because of our population demographic. And I think there presents an opportunity to gain some cultural awareness and competency by just going to see what a more diverse county looks like. And it has nothing to do with staff size or manpower. It's just the opportunity to address that repetitive response within the plans. And also to gain ideas about if in fact your county demographic ever changes, because census trends are showing, and then our own state youth demographics are showing that these populations may be one way today or may not have been identified yet, but that potentially changes. So it has nothing to do with the size or the capability of a county. It's more about addressing lack of diversity and cultural awareness. And finally, the goals that are listed here are specifically for this technical assistance process and what we hope some of the outcomes will be. And it says to provide education, tools, and resources that will help to reduce disparities. Because again, the goal is to try to address any disparities that's shown in a particular county's data, or to prevent that, or to help identify if it has not been identified previously. So it's education, tools, and resources. And I would hope that these don't override the DOJ things, because these are the specific goals that hope the outcome for this particular technical assistance process. Is there anything else before we
Tabidi
move
has his hand up.
Tabidi? Tabidi, sorry if you were speaking, we can't hear you.
I said, oh, sorry, thank you. So I think you hit a few of the issues that I was going to talk about. I just want to concur with you that I'm looking at the goals, and the issue is not size. And the goals are data informed. Am I not correct?
Bingo. So I can stop there in that regard. I mean, my goal would be to say in a space where, you know, we have documented population large differentials as far as youth of color being in a minority. And if they're on par with or equal to or not in a minority regarding juvenile justice, we have a problem. You know, there are many states where people of color in jails are in the minority and yet reflect the majority of those incarcerated, or at least are too close to being on par with the majority population. So part of this around youth is when you talk about issues of this overrepresentation and disparate treatment, studies show that, I'm a literature person, but just in our society, youth of color are not viewed as children. And that's a reality. And so that is something that's generated culturally in all entities of media. It is ensconced in the education, and we have to, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, that has to be addressed and rooted out. You know, how a goal should be, how do we get those population numbers in line with within these spaces? And the only way is to increase engagement. And if there is isolation and people aren't coming into contact with each other, the chances of believing in myths or negative views that would impact these sort of the cultural incompetencies or cultural conflicts or the disparate treatment or the overrepresentation are going to continue to exist. And so if that is happening,
I don't think this is the moment where I think the rubber meets the road, where I think our hardest part in this is going to be people defending the line as opposed to just engaging the data and trying to move forward. So I think it's important that we don't change the issue to, I think, the 5 goals that are outlined here that are based on the data. Now, if that data is inaccurate, let's make the focus on, really checking whether the data produces goal 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So sorry I took forever, but I really wanted to say that this is a huge thing, and it's going to be difficult, but I think what will be produced from it will be very positive.
Thank
Okay.
you to VD.
So Sanji, I want to make sure there's a question from the group, and I'll ask that in a minute. Is the next step, do we have more? Is in the hour Mark and Doug's presentation, or do I have time after the hour? Okay, so we can get to Mark.
Well, I'm trying to follow the presentation, but we definitely had a lot of discussion, wanted to make room for that as well. So is it back to me at this point?
Yes.
Can I jump in real quick? Sorry, Sanji, just one sec, because I'm appreciating the conversation, and I think it's worth a time check. Molly, kind of, okay, so we have, and maybe Anya or Molly can help. We got like 14, 15 minutes. We have a question from Tori, and then we have, I know we wanted to look at the timeline. So I assume we can, and I think, I don't know, there's some other folks on the line, and maybe they're just going to throw their questions into the chat. So maybe we'll just kind of keep encouraging. Tori, appreciate your question. If others if other folks listening in have questions, is that what we want to do, Molly?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think his question may come up, or maybe be responded to in the Mark question or Mark's presentation. If not, I was going to come back to it. So yes, questions in the chat are the easiest to manage.
Great. And Molly, if you don't mind, I just have one quick response, I think, to your kind of question about the overarching statutes, and I appreciate it, and I think you're right. I mean, I think that we have an opportunity to, BD has mentioned it, Christine, and there's tension, and there's some, we have, I think a lot of what we've kind of gone by is responses to sets of questions. So I'm just going to go out on the limb and say, I think, and Sanji will correct me, or Anya will correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how much depth we went into with individual county data, but that sounds like a great opportunity to go deeper. And I think checking our work and the statutes is an important thing for us to navigate. Yeah, I agree with you. I want to look into that and know that we want to build on both the opportunity and some of the challenges that exist at a county level. So some counties, I think at a minimum, we statutorily ask you to produce a plan. And, we want to push folks to try to advance in this arena. I don't know that we statutorily have, I don't know how much breadth we have, but we can check with DOJ, but we are really eager to partner and work at a county level that makes sense. So
I appreciate that, Brian. And I agree with you. I think there's 2 levels here. One is around contractual relationship.
Yeah.
That's a different thing than our aspirational. What are we wanting to move the whole state forward with?
Yep.
Those are 2 very different things in my world. This is around a contractual relationship for money. Aspirationally, I think that there's all sorts of opportunities that we need to build and gain and run with, that the sky is the limit, and those goals absolutely are we can even reach farther. But there's 2 elements to me. Yeah. One's contractual, one's aspirational. And I think we need to pursue both of them.
Great.
And one thing that sorry, I just want to make sure it's my turn.
Go ahead, Sanji.
One thing that I want to say is that to the Juvenile Justice Committee, I'm not saying that this has to be, but just to, because this is something that was developed within the Juvenile Justice Committee and approved by the committee and the Youth Development Council. So when we embarked upon this journey with Judge Abernathy's recommendation, I don't know if we need to revisit what defines within the law and the rules of how this technical assistance process can go. There was an identified need based on the submissions that were reviewed by multiple eyes, and the decision was approved for the technical assistance process, either provisionally or conditionally. And now this is just to share what the framework of that technical assistance process will be. And I would ask the Juvenile Justice Committee to ponder upon, do we need to revisit that recommendation and approval before we move forward? To answer Tori's question about if we reviewed individual county data during the process, I will just share what question 6 specifically states as a refresher and possibly education for some. It says, provide a description of cultural strategies, including addressing racial and ethnic disparities identified in your data analysis and inclusion. So that was supposed to be a part of the response. That was what we asked of counties to share with us, your own identified data analysis. And some of the counties definitely showed room for improvement in their response to that prompt. So in a part of that process, because we identified that, data analysis and identification is a very intimidating task at times, including for myself. And so if we move on to the next slide, we can see that in order to address that and to bring it specifically to the county level, that's one thing that we hope to be a part of this process. Tanisha, if you could please go back to the other slide so that we can look at the timeline. And I'll allow our partners with JJUS to share about just that, identifying county level racial and ethnic disparity data as a part of this overall process. So really quickly, if that in fact is what happens, we hope this month to finalize the plan, to host an informational session, a Q&A, to kind of go deeper from this specific conversation we're having right now, to begin scheduling those county meet and greets, to finalize the initial data conversation with JJUS. And a part of this technical assistance would be to provide a resource document for the participating counties that, as you all will see, I've begun drafting, but definitely open it up to assistance from anyone who is interested, and to begin to secure a partner to host and facilitate the recommended DEI and disparities training. So I will stop here to allow Doug Thomas and Mark Greenwald with JJUS, Juvenile Justice Information Systems, to share their thoughts and perspective about the data education and training component of this technical assistance. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Molly, Mark, and Doug, just a second, sorry about interrupting. So I would like to suggest that we extend the section of the committee meeting of the agenda for as long as it takes for Mark and Doug to finish their presentation, as well as get feedback both from the committee and from the audience, because we could deal with the remaining items either quickly or table down for the next meeting, but I would hate to, you know, just end this conversation just because of the time constraint. Thank you.
So I will kind of keep rolling through and touch base in a little bit. So yeah, let's keep rolling.
And if that's the case, Doug, I'll get started. And I apologize to the group. We don't have a formal presentation. We were brought in relatively recently, and we were asked if we could talk about training we might be able to assist with as it relates to JGIS. And just quickly, so you know, my name is Mark Greenwald. I'm the research manager for the Oregon Youth Authority. I'm a criminologist that just happens to specialize in juvenile delinquency. And most of my day job is analyzing data, statistics, and the performance of the Oregon Youth Authority, but we also spend a lot of time with JGIS. And we were asked about a couple of things, and we thought there might be a couple of trainings that might be useful. I have some comments about the technical assistance I'll give you in a moment, but we were thinking two things might be useful in terms of what JGIS can kick out to folks. Right now, for all counties in Oregon, there is a relative rate index, relative rate report, which is a disparities report that is produced by out of JGIS. And they're available for all counties in Oregon. And that will show relative representation of different populations of youth at different stages of the juvenile justice system. And we thought it might be useful to provide an overview of what that report is, what it's not, what it can do, how to interpret the tables. But then also along the way, I don't have the exact list of what counties needed to review, but one of the things you'll notice in that RRI report is if one of the things I struggle with as a statistician is I have to have enough data to make the math work. And sometimes when you have smaller counties, it can be difficult to, it's not appropriate to calculate statistics on very small numbers because I wouldn't want to make inferences on something that could be chance or something else. And so that could be a challenge if you're a small county and you have this relative rate report you're being asked to look at, but it doesn't really tell you much because I can't run the math on most of your groups. So we thought something else that might be useful would be, in addition to that training, to pair that up with training on just some of the annual reports, the basic major reports that are available, which would be where I would go if I didn't have an RI to go with. And these might be more familiar to some counties than others. Some counties and jurisdictions do have data analysis staff or research staff, most don't. And so we would be happy to provide an overview of what those reports contain. And then the other, and that's essentially the overview of the training we were asked for. And we wanted to get feedback from the group and other folks on, what would be useful. Typically when I'm setting up training or technical assistance, I'm trying to match it to a plan or an issue. And the goals that were on the previous slide, I think are good. I think it was the aspirational goals, the 5 goals. But if I was a county, I could implement those in a lot of really different ways, right? I might be a county that's really focused on reducing disparities in detention or these around detention, right? And you can focus on that. You might want to be a county that's focused more on the engagement with youth and families, which would be a completely different, training and package. And so, we just wanted to hear more today about the needs and what we might be able to assist with. I'm going to be happy to partner with anyone to assist with analyzing data, looking at data, how to hold people accountable with data. I have no problem holding people accountable with data. We just want to make sure we measure it, the way it needs to be measured. And I might be able to assist with that. That was my kind of quick intro. Doug, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add.
I do not. That was perfect. I think what we've been talking about is sort of just data literacy and helping understand what these funny little numbers do mean, what they don't mean, and what's not included in them. So,
and I believe this is the training that I just mentioned, where we would go through those relative rate index reports and the available annual reports and other reports that are available from JGIS. That would be the training we would have available and ready for folks by December. That wouldn't be a problem for us to put together. We've also been asked about data walk and more detailed data discussions. I saw a comment in the notes that I thought was quite good, which was, doing a deep dive into looking at, what's going on in different areas, and we might be able to assist with that, but that's more of a down the road project. I was coming to talk to you about what we might be able to help with by December. And Sanjay, I think that covered what you asked me to talk about. If I can add anything, I'm happy to.
Thank you, Mark and Doug. Yes, just again to be able to help give a introductory education and training experience to the participating counties of a general overview of the RRI reports, what they mean, how a county may be able to look further beyond that report. I think is something that we discuss in the event that their data number set is not sufficient to generate something within the RRI report. But again, throughout the technical assistance process, the opportunity will be to identify a specific need for an individual county. So some counties may need more assistance with data analysis and identification than others. And during the development of SMART goals, there's opportunity to say another goal is to get more specialized training or technical assistance for data analysis and identification. That is something that the county is setting a goal for their own benefit outside of the training and overview that we can provide. And as far as the data walk, again, that's a hope that is something that will happen, and don't want to plan it prematurely, because I envision it to be an event where people can be engulfed in data and understand more than just the number, and connect these statistics to individual youth, and potentially have youth have the opportunity or their families to share their stories, but also to kind of immerse ourselves in how to use data. But as Brian shared in the past, like, not get data drunk, so that we just kind of like hyper focus on data and don't turn it into an action plan to do something with it. Because the ultimate goal is to use data to inform changes in our policies, practices, and procedures, so that we can ultimately reduce racial and ethnic disparities. So thank you, Doug and Mark, again. If there are specific questions for our JJS staff who are present, feel free to ask those now.
Any committee members have questions for JJS during the JJS team? Christina, I'm going to ask, I think you are the chair of the JJS reports committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just unmuted myself because I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand.
I'm just going to call on you then. There you go.
Yeah, no, I was going to actually ask Mark and Doug if they were envisioning, if you two were envisioning including some of the data analyst research people from the various counties that are part of the JJS Data and Evaluation Committee that Molly just mentioned. So for everybody else on the Juvenile Justice Committee, JJS does have a committee that is a collaboration between the county juvenile department members and folks from OYA, including Doug and Mark, who are with us today. So that's a group that takes a look at a lot of different issues around data and works on the published report and creates new reports from time to time. So yeah, so Mark and Doug, were you envisioning in the training trying to bring some other folks in, like, I don't know, for example, Bridget, Zanny?
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought that deep because our involvement was relatively recent, but I think it would be a great idea, because the committee that Christina just mentioned is a committee of nerds. It's people like me that look at data and research and JJS all day long. And there's a couple state people there, and there's quite a few county folks, and they could bring something to discussion. Doug and I can help mock up. Here's what we show and talk about. But I have a high degree of confidence that I can get a couple of those folks to be a part of the training with us, because that I think would be very useful.
Yeah.
And they were all we recently redesigned those reports. the numbers for 2020. Prior to 2019, there's some issues in the report we needed to address. And so that group's also very familiar with what's in the report, what you can use it for, almost as importantly, what you can't use it for. And yeah, well, I think we're going to be asking them about that here at our next committee meeting. I think that's next week.
It's this week.
Yeah, like I said, it's this week.
And of course, Christina, we wouldn't plan for the resources of any of, county folks without talking to the committee first.
Right.
Because that's how we roll. Very considerate that way.
Perfect. Any other questions? So thank you guys. I really appreciate Mark and Doug, you joining, and all of the reports, the RRI reports, just for people, if is anybody interested, is looking at them. They're on the OYA website, the annual reports. And so not that there's no homework required, but truly we and the Juvenile Justice Partnership between OYA and the county juvenile departments have been doing those for several years. And so they're broke out by each of the counties. Which is
even if I could just add before you close this section out, I'm going to be most useful in assisting with technical assistance around data statistics. I can be a resource for the national research in this area in disparities. I am, published in this area. I'm not going to be an expert on all types of training and cultural issues, but we are a resource for that as well. And I will post a link to where we have these reports on our website. But if you can think of things around those topics where we could be useful, we want to be a partner. If there's something we could put together, be it targeted or generic, that's something we're happy to talk about.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug and Mark, again, and thank you all for the discussion surrounding data. And it's very much a cornerstone of this process because you have to first identify any disparities. So I wanted to address a couple of questions in the chat. Digna, thank you for your question with regards to mentorship and program activity. How will counties be matched up? This is just something that is an opportunity. With that opportunity, as far as mentorships, that is something that our Juvenile Justice Committee members, who are also members, staff of county juvenile departments, definitely would love their feedback, and any other county juvenile department staff, again, OJDDA as well. That's an opportunity that we will be very hands-off with. If in fact you as a county juvenile department is interested in learning more from a county who is, your peer in this work, you all may be able to, and of course we could help facilitate the process, but you all would potentially be able to say, hey, County Yellow, I heard that you are doing awesome work as it relates to racial and ethnic disparities. I would love to sit down and talk to you about your work and see if you can help me out, because the opportunity is there for peer entities, organizations, agencies, departments, however you want to be referred to, who are doing the same work, just in different areas, with different levels of progress at this specific moment in time, to say, and this was a recommendation that was offered by one of our Juvenile Justice Committee members in a previous discussion. So thought that it was an excellent idea, and hope that within the county juvenile department peer group, you all could work that out amongst yourselves with our help facilitating or giving recommendations on a potential county that you may want to work with. But that is not something that has a bulleted process. It's an opportunity to partner with with your sister or brother county. And also, I think I saw a couple of questions, one from Matt, about, we had this conversation previously in a different forum about addressing the completion of the section for that response. And I think that that is a conversation that could be a part of the meet and greet, but ultimately, I think there's the opportunity to identify areas of growth throughout this process, in addition to just like giving a quote unquote better answer, but that's not my decision to make. So for the Juvenile Justice Committee, again, there's something to reflect on about saying, hey, can we just give a update our answer? I don't know if that is something that you all want to consider. And Tori Lynn asked, at what point do counties get feedback on their plan so that any weaknesses can be addressed? And it may be, again, throughout the meet and greet and the identification of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and developing SMART goals. That is the time where we will look over your submitted plan and just address your particular county and what led to the drafting of the plan as it was submitted. Learning more about the county and its population of youth and the work that you're doing. So all of those are going to happen in the meet and greet and ensuing technical assistance sessions. Again, I'm encouraging the Juvenile Justice Committee to determine what quantifies this process. If you are one of those counties, is the technical assistance as we are presenting it, or are there caveats that you can somehow ramp off-road from the process? That's something that you all will need to please consider. So this is just an overview of a timeline that has been drafted and updated from our last meeting. As you can see, the core of the technical assistance will really begin in 2022, where in estimated approximate timeline of February, we would begin the process after we have wrapped up the meet and greets. And the one item that we think will be one of the first items is the data training that Jay just will host with us in December. And the hosted DEI training that we are envisioning is, again, the conversations have started and making some good progress with a potential vendor to do this work. And I hope that that works out, but definitely open to other facilitators who might be able to provide and host a DEI training sometime in the spring of next year. And again, this goes back into the process of that question that I asked at the end of this presentation as well, is what does success look like? We have to begin check-ins and evaluations to see if these plans that we're developing, how they're going, what additional help may be needed, what additional resources, tools, information, because again, the core of this is to connect opportunity for growth with resources that will facilitate that growth. And putting to something in writing that kind of makes it more intentional, because the reality is the submissions were identified as having opportunity for growth, that the focus counties who were either provisional or conditional. And again, this is not about checking a list. It should be about how can I create the best culture within my county juvenile department that would allow vulnerable youth who have been historically and systemically oppressed on a unfortunately consistent basis, which our data across the state, across the country has shown repeatedly that there is a tremendous amount of work that still needs to be done so that we can allow all youth, but more importantly in this realm, Black and Brown youth to be able to have the best opportunity to reach their full potential. And so far, our data shows us that the juvenile justice system is disparate toward them. And there's the opportunity to create a culture of equity. And this is just one small piece of a much larger puzzle that can provide some tools, education, and resources to address that need that has been repeatedly identified. So just going to the next slide, please.
Sanji,
Yes.
This is Molly. I want to continue to address, I think Christina brought up a question or a comment in the chat, and I would like her to if she feels comfortable to read that, or if not, I would be glad to, but I do think that counties have some questions. So Christina, do you want to bring it up or do you want me to?
No, I put my comment in the chat. I don't understand any rational reason for delaying providing feedback that could help counties get information and start working on a problem. I don't understand that. I was reviewing my notes from the June meeting and I specifically brought this issue up. So I'm very concerned that it's now almost 5 months later, and there are colleagues who are different juvenile department directors who have not received any feedback other than what their rating was as either being provisional or conditional. Just getting a rating doesn't help people to start working on things. And once again, this work cannot be done in a vacuum. Every county has things it's working on. Our county is working on things, and every single thing we do, we invite the other stakeholders, partners, people to the table. So I'm frustrated when I hear my colleagues saying that they haven't gotten information that is really important and valuable. And as someone who spent time reviewing 5 different plans, I read them like all of the other Juvenile Justice Committee members did, and I put specific feedback down in the comments because I thought the comments were going to be shared with the folks putting together the plans, but that hasn't happened. So I think that's overdue, and that's only fair. So I'm, that's all I really have to say.
And I would like to respond to you, Christine. I really appreciate that feedback and that perspective and insight from voices in the county juvenile departments. To me, one thing that has delayed this process is the continual need to revisit it, because we have to, and I think it's only fair to allow people who are participating in the process to have a voice and offer any questions or concerns. But until we get to a place where we can say, okay, we're good to go, all of these things were scheduled to happen in a meet and greet, which originally were scheduled for September, October. And because this meeting was planned, all of that had to be put on hold so that we could have this conversation. So I just want to make that point, is that a pause was placed intentionally on moving forward with allowing counties to get one-on-one feedback, because this conversation was discovered to need to happen. So I just want to hope that that provides some clarity and response to that concern. I agree. I think it's very important for an individual county who is a part of this group to know why they're here. And that is the plan of the very first meeting, to explain and to go over the plan and to address any feedback on how it was submitted. All of the things that have been pointed out is what is deemed to happen in the meet and greet. And they were originally scheduled back when this was presented to the YDC on September 9th to happen in September and October, but they were placed on hold because this conversation was identified to need to happen. Jeff, you have a very long question. I'm going to ask if on this slide, I'm opening it up to the Juvenile Justice Committee members and whoever else is interested in being a part of this process, because ultimately, as you all have pointed out, but I do feel like there has to be a balance to that as well, that stakeholders in the juvenile justice system all have to collaborate to address disparities. It's very important, but if we are widening the scope of this technical assistance, bringing in more people is something that would make this a lot larger scale than it is right now, because this identified process was supposed to be in response to a need identified from county juvenile plan submissions. And so again, I, as myself, would like clarity on, what the Juvenile Justice Committee would like to do as it relates to what was identified to be technical assistance for those identified counties. But I am.
So Sanji, this is Molly. I'm going to put a pause here. We've covered a lot of ground, and I want to do a check-in. I think you bring up a good point with the committee members. Up until this point, so in this next slide, I see, Sonji, you're moving into kind of the additional activities that were on your front page. I want to do a check-in with the committee members on the current framework to start the process so that we can leave our discussion today with, because as Sonji has now pointed out, I did not realize that communication with the counties was contingent upon this meeting. But now that she's pointed that out, I want to be able to make sure that we can remove that barrier that this meeting no longer presents for the conversations to be had with those counties. Because like Christina, I've been approached by many of my colleagues and trying to find out what they did wrong and wanting to have that feedback. And I pulled up my smart sheet and reread many of the comments, some of which I think counties are going to want to have. So I want to make sure, Sanji, from this, before we go forward with additional things, do you feel like you have everything you need to start the process?
As long as that process is, for the most part, defined. Yes, having a meet and greet and explaining how your county was identified as provisional or conditional, and going over the submission and explaining an overview of the process and learning about a county is not difficult to do, with the exception of finding mutually convenient times.
Okay, so if we go back to your slide before, to that timeline, I really love that slide. Like that absolutely is. So do you feel like today, so far, not the hopeful things in the additional activities, but do you feel like today you, after this meeting, have what is necessary to do what's in November 2021?
Yes.
Okay, how about December of 2021?
Absolutely.
Okay, so, okay, that's all I wanted to know. And so Anya and Brian, you also feel clear like we're ready to move forward. Parasa, let's ask you, and then you have a question.
Thanks, Molly. One question I had was, what is necessary from the Juvenile Justice Committee to advance the work? Are we
Yeah.
Is it intended to take a vote, like a formal vote to move things forward? Just want to do a process check so that we're able to streamline as much as possible.
Exactly. Thank you. That's what you said it so much better than what I needed to say. I want to process check so that we can leave this meeting with action steps. Anya, do you feel comfortable?
Yes.
Okay. Brian has a thumbs up. Okay. So I'm going to recap, and then Sonja, I'm going to let you go to the next steps, which are a little bit farther down in this time frame. But you have what you need to start the conversations with each of the counties. And during each of those county conversations, the comments that were shared. However, there are several counties that received satisfactory that have comments that I believe we need to share those with those counties as well, because like Christina said, there are many of you who took time to write comments about plans, and the counties have never seen those. So I want to remove all those barriers.
And I think that this is that particular feedback is something that crosses outside of just my scope of responsibility. So I think that the counties who would like to get feedback on their plan, no matter their rank on this one particular question, because this process blossomed out of an identified need on addressing disparities within these particular counties. And so the overall plan is something that is a multi party process that is more than just myself. So I hope that that is my identified role in this technical assistance is to help counties who showed the need for an opportunity and room for growth in addressing racial and ethnic disparities and cultural competency and awareness.
I agree completely, Sanji. It's just none of the information has been shared out. And I'm not pointing fingers in any direction. I just need the process so we can get the information out the door.
I'm with you, Molly, and maybe, I don't know, I mean, in the interest of time, I don't know how we did it 3 years ago. But I agree. And or how we did it 6 years ago or 20 years ago. Let's just.
It doesn't matter. And
Let's get it out.
We used a new technology. The smart sheets were a new technology.
Gotcha.
So
Anya and Anya, I think it's just a matter of figuring out the detail.
And I was gonna suggest a couple of things if that's okay. So for one thing, to Parasa's point, do we need some kind of formal statement from the Juvenile Justice Committee that, yes, please go ahead with the technical assistance plan? So without any further ado, Sanji can start providing that technical assistance. I know the committee doesn't take a vote, but it would be good to have some kind of consensus from the group that we can reflect in the minutes that on this day, the Juvenile Justice Committee of the Youth Development Council approved the technical assistance plan as presented by Sanji, or if there are any changes that need to be made to that plan, please let's discuss them now. But I would deeply appreciate, and I believe all my colleagues will agree with me, that we would really like to move forward with the plan or variation of the plan, but we need to move on. So Molly, Parasa, any thoughts how we can make it formal?
Sure. I think instead of doing necessarily a formal vote, I think consensus could be gathered. And so I'm going to hold a good space, and Adrian and Tabiti and Parasa and Sam, if you would weigh in. And Andy, if you joined us and I just can't see you on my screen yet, if you could weigh in with an affirmative or a comment, that would be amazing. Or a negative, either way.
Hold up, Molly, can you repeat what you're asking of me? I'm sorry.
Sure. No, I'm asking that we accept what Sonji has put forward to us, and we give her the green light to go ahead and start walking down the pathway. Rasa.
I'll start us off. So I want to just communicate to the full committee that I fully support the timeline here and would like to see that staff have the support they need to move forward on the plan in communicating back with juvenile county departments and having these initial meetings and ensuring that they have the feedback from their plans, but also have clear next steps on what additional technical assistance requirements might be needed and supports.
Yeah, I would say in the affirmative too, and I agree with Tabiti's comments in the chat.
And I'm going to agree with both and thank you for the agreement.
I also agree. I think, oh, good, Andy, thank you. I will find you on my screen view here in a minute. It's great that you're weighing in. Sam, how about you?
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I've been listening to the discussion, reading everything, and I think one of the elephants in the room is with these trainings and with the communication, unfortunately, some counties may feel uncomfortable. You know, that's the thing. When the data is shared with them and some of the practice and suggestions may come up where to change policies or practices, and they may be uncomfortable with that. And I think, and the change is hard. And I think I'm kind of sensing, yeah, the angst, and even within amongst ourselves, the angst and the apprehension of offending or making some of our counties feel uncomfortable, and so forth. But agree with Tabiti. It's time, and as Christina said, our county should have gotten the feedback a lot sooner and so forth. Yeah, I too move forward, vote or move forward, but I think yeah, it's going to be necessary, but I think, yeah, to make the changes for our kids. And I'm just being open and honest. And after listening to everything, and I was silent on purpose. I just sorry, Sanjay, for opening the meeting up with my question about what happens if a county declines and so forth. I didn't want to delve into it. I thought it was already settled, but yeah.
Okay. So to be honest, and thank you for the honesty, I'm going to have, I think in my county, we were covered satisfactory, but I think I need to lean into the conversation too, and I shouldn't be off the hook to be asking questions about what our county is doing as a whole. But again, that comes back to my aspirational, not necessarily contractual. I think that becomes a bigger piece. So after this is all done, I hope there's space that we can participate in the conversation in the TA as well. So I think this is just a start. I do think that we've created angst, and I'll own part of that we've been slow in giving counties feedback. And the fear of the unknown is difficult. And so I think that has been out there. So once we start down the path, my hope is that everyone will lean in, and much of that angst will go away, and we'll have great, open and honest conversations. Is there anybody, Christina, you're on the committee, any thoughts or final, how do you feel about starting off with the TA?
I don't have any concern as long as I've already raised my issue, which is around fundamental fairness in my mind with regard to communication. So what I've heard is that's going to be addressed. And I absolutely agree with what Sam said, what Tabiti has said, what everybody on this committee really has said. These are difficult conversations. It's hard to face sometimes when you're staring at bad statistics about the community that you are trying to serve and do good work in. That's hard for anybody. And I don't want to come across in any way, shape, or form as being, just because I'm a juvenile director, that I'm making excuses for anybody. That is not what my message is. My message is we're all in this together. We're all committed to doing good work with kids and families. We're all wanting to make sure that every kid, and especially the Black and brown kids who are starting at a massive disadvantage, get what they need. So with the information that there will be individual feedback shared, that clarification with the counties that were conditional or provisional. And I like your idea, Molly. Everybody should get their feedback. But that goes outside the scope of this conversation in terms of the racial and ethnic disparities. With that, yes, I'm fine with moving forward with approving the TA plan. Yeah, I think I don't need to keep talking. I think I've said what I need to say.
Thank you all for all of your comments.
Molly, you are muted.
No, go ahead, Sonji. I was going to hand it back to her.
So for the county juvenile departments who are present and will be a part of this process, is there any feedback just initially about if you all think that, and you may not want to identify it now, if you would like to email me or call me or text me and let me know if an in-person meeting is something that's feasible for your current public health safety guidelines as it relates to COVID and travel and visitors in your department. Because the next step will be to schedule meet and greets with the participating counties, and you all will receive information to select a date for that meet and greet, and also just an email overview of what this process will entail. If you all think it's needed and are willing to participate, I am open to hosting that REDTA informational session Q&A. If you think that this is enough and you have all the preliminary information, just want to get to the meat and potatoes of a one-on-one, then we can bypass the informational session and just go strictly into beginning the meet and greets. And of course, you will also receive a scheduling opportunity to poll what dates in December would be convenient for you to participate in the data training. Our partners at JJDP have been gracious enough to offer potentially doing it more than one time, up to 1 or 2 times if need be, in order to accommodate various schedules in December. So that is the next piece of information that you will receive, is a scheduling poll to determine what date in December would work for you to do the JJDP data overview training, in addition to reaching out to schedule the one-on-one meet and greet. If you could please go to the next slide, Tanasia. Again, going back to our Juvenile Justice Committee members, I think the opportunity exists for anyone who would like to get more involved in hands-on. One back, please, Tanasia. Is your assistance, if you have the time or interest in participating. Any part of this process, you are more than welcome to be involved in, like, hands-on. But special requests that I have, and even talk to Anya and Brian briefly about possibly forming a subcommittee specifically for this racial and ethnic disparities technical assistance process, of interested committee members who might want to get more hands-on and like really dig deep into this process and how it will be executed. The drafting of the manual, there's an opportunity to edit and review and provide any feedback. The mentorships that we talked about, helping to facilitate facilitate those. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but there are some more likely committee members who might fit that opportunity better than others. Assisting with planning visits to more diverse counties, assisting with the planning and facilitation of a community forum for youth and families, and assistance with guidance and framework for increasing youth representation on county juvenile department governing bodies. So these are some things that I have thought about that I would love additional help with from Juvenile Justice Committee members who are interested, and don't have to discuss it now, but just some things to reflect on. And we'll reach out to some of you to see if that's something that you're interested in, or if you know now that possibly forming a ad hoc subcommittee for technical assistance is something that might be beneficial, please let us know now. And finally, the next slide may not have the opportunity to discuss in this meeting either. Please, Tanasia, the next slide. And Jeff Milligan, while we're going there, I wanted to address your comment in the chat about risk factors and positive youth development strategies for Hispanic youth. Again, I think that that's a part of that one-on-one TA session of addressing strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats, and coming up with SMART goals. And I truly think that if there's a need for that particular course of action, then it should definitely be a part of the technical assistance process, because ultimately I'm trying to assist you all in giving you tools, resources, information to develop your game plan about how you want to address needs of addressing disparities in your community. And so this is a partnership, but it's really just kind of an opportunity to get some tools that will help you execute and develop a plan. So if there is a need to address risk factors for Hispanic youth, then absolutely that could be something that is discussed and mapped out and fine-tuned and put into SMART goals in a technical assistance session. So I hope that that answers that question, Jeff. And thank you for the question. When has a county, and this kind of goes somewhat in line with Sam's question, in a way, when has the county fulfilled the grant agreement is no longer conditional or provisional? I think Sam raised a very important question that, you know, may need to be reflected on some more, like what if the TA is not accepted? And then finally, what does success in this technical assistance journey look like in coming up with a process? Like, how do we know that the process has been executed and gone according to plan and evaluated to make sure that we met the purpose of the technical assistance? Thank you all so much. Very appreciative to Molly and Anya for your graciousness to allow this to take up so much space in today's meeting. I know that wasn't the plan, but definitely had some fruitful dialogue that is extremely important in this process. And I thank everyone for their insight and input and questions. And again, the goal is to make sure that we do the right thing for those Black and Brown youth who have so often gotten the short end of the stick in the juvenile justice system and in this country, and give them the opportunity to levelize the playing field of systemic and institutional oppression and discrimination and racism and injustice, so that they too can have the opportunity to reach their full potential, along with all youth that we serve in the state of Oregon. We want them out of the juvenile justice system, right? So thank you all again.
Okay, thank you, Sanji. So Anya, I'm going to go back to our agenda, and I'm going to ask that I think that we need to table the JCP OARs revision. I think we need to table that till next time. I think that's a longer discussion. Am I correct?
Actually, could we just have like 2 minutes in that?
Sure. Yeah, if you absolutely.
So hold on, I'm trying to do something super fancy here. I'm trying to, where'd the chat go? I want to put something in the chat. But it's not working. So anyway, then I'll just have to tell you. I didn't want to send the PowerPoint to Nasia's way, but I'll just very briefly. You may or may not recall that during this last legislative session, at least 2 Senate bills passed. One was Senate Bill 54 that requires revisions to the review of local high-risk juvenile crime prevention plans and ensure alignment of the plans with diversion plans and basic services grants of county juvenile departments. Part of that bill was that the council, which is the Youth Development Council, shall adopt rules in consultation with county juvenile departments and Oregon Youth Authority. At the same time, Senate Bill 83 was passed, and that's the bill relating to the OYA basic and diversion services, and pretty much that's similar thing. OYA, in consultation with county juvenile departments and the Youth Development Division, shall adopt rules to coordinate and align the high-risk juvenile crime prevention plans, juvenile diversion plans, and the juvenile crime prevention basic services. So that said, there's a work group that's been established and started working. That's comprised of Oregon Youth Authority staff, YDD staff, as well as several county juvenile departments. Now, there's a timeline that's associated with the rules. So the draft rules are due by June 2022, which is a little over 6 months. And the final rules adoption is due in January 2023. So I'm just putting it on the agenda here for the Juvenile Justice Committee. That will be part of the work that we need to be engaged in, because the rules need to be adopted by the Youth Development Council at a later stage. But it's also an opportunity for us to revisit our juvenile crime prevention planning processes and maybe adjust some rules to make sure that there is no ambiguity left for the future planning. So that said, I'm not asking for you to form any work group at this point, but please keep it on your radar.
So Anya, I think that's really great. And I think maybe at our next juvenile justice meeting, I think we need to have a report from that committee that's working on it between YDD staff, OYA staff, and the county juvenile department directors. I think that would be great to bring to this committee to have that dialogue. So I know, I just think that would be a good thing to just kind of update this group on at every meeting and having just a standing 5-10 minute update.
Absolutely, I'll be happy to. That's why I just didn't want to table it completely. To just have at least a very brief kind of, not the banner, keeping you.
Well, and I guess I didn't realize that's what it was. So that's even better, because I was thinking you were going to do Senate Bill 83 update under other business. So you knocked off 2 things with one presentation. So that's great.
Oh, thank you. And I was kind of I got a nice segue from our earlier conversation into that. And second item here, we don't have a whole lot of time, and I know Lindsay is here and she will give you a little bit of an update on what she's working on, but there's an ask at the end of her presentation.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I'll just say that there's not quite an ask in what I'm about to say, but there's potential for the Juvenile Justice Committee's work and assistance. So there's been a few guidances issued by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention relating to the compliance monitoring. And I believe, Molly, you were part of some of these discussions. So the 2 main issues that guidances have been changing, and they're not finalized yet. Therefore, we still have a bit of time to regroup and get up to date. So one is around the interest of justice guidance that's relating to youth who are charged as adults and whether they can be placed in jails or juvenile detention facilities. So that's one bit that might change, some way of us monitoring compliance. And the other one is re-guided or re-explained definition of adult inmate. So that has a potential implication for use in Oregon Youth Authority. So anyway, I don't want to go any further into details since the guidances have not been finalized. There is still conversation, but it's something that's super important for us to keep in mind and address. Hopefully that maybe by the next meeting that will be, because in turn we need to issue guidances to the field. And I know when Ryan left, he left a few drafts of guidances that were unfinished at that time, and in part because we were waiting for the guidance from the office, right? And these guidances were subsequent to the rules that the Youth Development Council adopted for the implementation of compliance monitoring responsibilities for the state. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm going with that. And I know today was a super important conversation and we didn't want to let it kind of go unfinished. But Molly, perhaps at the next committee meeting, we could have some conversation about the federal rules and changes and things like that. And Lindsay, I know you had a quick update and perhaps you were seeking some help from the Juvenile Justice Committee.
Yeah, I'm still playing catch up from my vacation, but I am currently in the process of collecting data for any juveniles detained or confined in a secure facility qualifying as an adult jail or lockup for FY21. This month, I'm going to try to start reaching out to secure facilities qualifying as a juvenile detention or correctional facility to get any data on status and non-offender type juveniles. Doug, I don't think he's in here anymore, but he's one of the people I need to contact. And then Ryan had left me this form that I'm using for the adult jail and lockups. I wasn't sure if there was one for reaching out to the juvenile detention centers, if anybody in here knows or has a form maybe from the past. If you wanted to share it with me, I could probably tailor it to our needs. I don't even know if one exists, but yeah, and I haven't done any inspections yet. But yeah, just right now, just trying to get as much data from facilities as I can.
But Lindsay, didn't you need some help with the data from the juvenile detention facilities?
Well, I was looking at Ryan's timeline here. And for November, he says, reach out to Nina Bell and Doug Thomas for JGIS and data there. So I'm going to presume they send it to them and then I get all of the data from those two contact points.
Okay, so we'll have this conversation. Do you have any questions for the Juvenile Justice Committee or vice versa? Does anybody have any questions for Lindsay relating to compliance monitoring?
And this is one area that when we get a little bit of downtime before we start talking about new plans, that we have Lindsay and Anya do a little bit of a presentation to this group about compliance monitoring with so many new members. This is a big component of our state advisory group is the compliance and how we are able to receive funds from the federal government to support some of the work that we do. And so thank you so much, Lindsay. I've been trying to follow and do the different webinars, and the interest of justice actually aligns pretty well with the state of Oregon's approach to juvenile justice. But I think just providing this group some background would be helpful in the future.
Okay, yeah, and the call last month was canceled, and then this month I was on vacation, so I am missing out on a lot of stuff. So hopefully the call this month hopefully will be good, and I can join that too and get as much knowledge as I can to share with you all.
Great. And absolutely, Mark's right. Doug has all of the county contacts. Myself, our OJDDA website has all of the county contacts and all the detention managers. If there's anything that you need, by all means, just reach out and we can make sure that that happens with the facilities. Other business. Anya, will you please share with this group our work and our training coming up on November 9th? And several of the juvenile directors are still here, so we can at least share information.
Absolutely. So we're thrilled to announce that we've been working with Basic Rights Oregon on designing, and I'm stressing the word designing, customized technical assistance and training to the juvenile detention facilities regarding services to LGBTQ+ youth. I see Tori is still here. Tori and Molly have been working with Basic Rights Oregon, and there were representatives from other juvenile departments and detention facilities to design, will help them customize the training for detention and other leadership and juvenile justice staff. So the training will be held on November 9th from 8:30 to 12:30. The audience is limited because the trainers were not comfortable doing a training for more than 40 people. I think 42 is the maximum we could negotiate. And this afternoon, actually, Molly will be sending out a little training announcement that we got from Basic Rights Oregon. And I believe before we send it out, Tanisha and I would like to run it by you because we were still at the last meeting not 100% clear how to invite folks other than the detention managers. So, but that's coming. But we're thrilled with this collaboration. Seriously, it's Basic Rights Oregon and an amazing partner in this work. That's the training you wanted to talk about, because I take any chance to just brag about the amazing work that they do.
Yeah, no, that was truly the amazing work that Basic Rights and the conversations of the variety of detention facilities that have come to the table to help create the training has been just an amazing collaboration. So
absolutely, so grateful. But there's also federal training coming up next week. That's the one that I believe Melissa may have sent out the training announcement, and it's free to all state advisory group members, which include everyone who is in the Juvenile Justice Committee. And that will be kind of more detailed explanation of what the federal expectations are. I don't know if it's open to people outside of the state advisory group, so I'm not sure I should be advertising it to.
No, but to our Juvenile Justice Committee members, if you sign up for it, even if you're not able to attend at that moment in time, they'll send you a link and you can watch it later. And those are really good webinars, just kind of 101 trainings. And I often after the recording, eat lunch as I listen to them. And so just those opportunities that Anya sends out to us are good.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for putting a plug for that. I'll be happy to send it, like resend that invite to everybody. And the only other business is kind of answering to Sam's question here in the chat. How often does the committee meet? And it leads us to our next item on the agenda. When is the next meeting going to be? So do you feel that we should be meeting next month? Because traditionally, Sam's question was, do we meet quarterly or monthly? And the answer is as needed. There was a time when we needed to meet monthly. Then there was a time when we didn't need to meet every month. But so what's the pleasure of the group?
So I'm going to, just as the chair, share that we have a lot on our plate. We continue to have a lot on our plate, and especially with the TA work that we're asking to move forward. I would say that I'm going to probably recommend that we don't meet in January, because it really kind of comes into that holiday time between Christmas and the New Year and that break. But I would suggest that we meet, at least in December, to check in on if meetings are coming forward or any kind of feedback. And that would be December 6th. And Anya and Brian and Sanji, you can push back on me if I'm misdoing that, but I think we have enough agenda items to continue forward in December.
No, I think it's just, I appreciate
Agreed.
the opportunity, and I hope it's all right with the committee members.
Great. Thanks, Christina, for weighing in and in chat. Is there anyone that doesn't think that we should meet? That's an interesting way to phrase that question, isn't it?
Well, I don't want to speak for other committees, but to my knowledge, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the most active committee of the Youth Development Council. So I appreciate your dedication. Sam.
Yeah, and I asked that question because everyone here is super busy, and I find it's a lot easier to have scheduled meetings on our calendar, and it's a lot easier to cancel them, than rather than Anya say, hey guys, we need to meet because of this, and then we have to find a time and so forth. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting we schedule them monthly and then cancel them as needed instead of scheduling them as needed? Will that work for the group?
That works for me. It makes it easy for me.
Okay. So Tanasia will be kind enough to send out invitations through the year, and it's going to be always first Monday of each month from 1 to 3, and we will be canceling if there's nothing to discuss.
So I have one last request, and then I'm going to let us go because I've taken 2 minutes of your time, and I'm super, super careful about that. Thank you, Andy, and that's the reason, is because the seniors need their lunches. So I appreciate that. If you're a member of the public and you attended today, thank you. If you would please put your name and role and agency in the chat for Tanisha to be able to capture who was here, that would be amazing. So if you are, I think we have all of our people here, but I see Stacy Davis. I'm not sure, Stacy, where you're from. Thank you for joining us today. Aaron, thank you for joining us. I believe Aaron's Columbia County Juvenile or Community Corrections. Derek, and I will, Herring, appreciate you for joining us today. And I hope you learned a lot from us. And I think those are the only, and Digna Moreno. I happen to know she's from Umatilla County. And I had seen Tori Lynn on earlier from Lynn County and Jeff Milligan from Kojak, but I know I'm missing people. I just want to be able to capture who was here for the record. And with that, I think it's a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tanasia, very much. Welcome to your first meeting.
Thank you.